morning, everyone. Happy you all are joining us. I definitely am excited and thrilled that we have Chris joining us today for what I don't know, Chris, you tell me, is this kind of one of those never before or maybe a handful of times it's been done kind of experience?
We've only done this once before with some board members. So yeah, this is a pretty, I don't want to say exclusive, but it is something that not too many people have had the opportunity to see. So this is definitely a cool opportunity for our members to check out.
Well, that you heard it here, folks. It's definitely a great opportunity to see some behind the scenes all of our collections that not many people do have an opportunity to. So because this is virtual, we are able to take you to our warehouse and Chris will show us everything around. So thank you all for joining us again. If you have any questions as we're going through the tour, feel free to put them in the Q&A box and we will try our best to get around to them. And I know Chris is excited to hear from you all as far as anything that stands out as he's walking through and giving you a tour of our collections warehouse site. But we're going to go ahead and jump right into one of our, I know, pressing questions that I am dying to hear from Chris is, Chris, how or what is the story behind how you got to the position that you're at now? And I know a lot of members here want to know it and are excited to hear the story behind all of our staff and their road to becoming the staff that they are today. So Chris, what's the story behind your road to being here?
So I would like to begin by saying thank you to all the members out there. We genuinely appreciate your support of the museum and our mission. But I've been working for the museum for 16 years now. I was originally hired as a field paleontologist, and that was back in 2004. A friend of mine who is also a paleontologist here at the museum, she was moving on to another endeavor, and she called me and said, hey, there's a position as a field paleontologist at the museum. I highly recommend that you apply. And at that point in time, I was actually a volunteer in the paleontology department, working maybe once to twice a month. And luckily, Tom Demaray saw something in me and decided to hire me. For about 10 years, I was doing field work. And then within the last 5 to 6 years, I transitioned into the lab setting. They were looking for a preparator, and my experience, I had the experience to do it. So we moved me from the field to the lab, but I still do quite a bit of field work and I do a lot of lab work. So it's kind of a jack of all trades position at the museum.
Wow.
And I'm going to welcome you guys to the warehouse. We are at a non-disclosed location in Chula Vista. This warehouse is approximately 10,000 square feet, or so I've been told. I'm bad at making these types of guesses. One of the things, I don't know if I was able to talk to this about, but the Museum of Contemporary Art, it's actually their warehouse, and we have a portion of their warehouse. So we are in a smaller version. So when you see how big our warehouse is, you can only guess how big their part of the warehouse is. In the beginning of the pandemic, back in March and April, when we were in the shelter in place, the warehouse, which was typically used to store our larger specimens or things that weren't necessarily needed in-house, were brought here. And so it was a very passive space. And at that moment in time, the paleontology department required a space for us to work with tools that are used in the lab. And so moving from a passive to an active space, we went ahead and kind of built a temporary laboratory space in here. So myself and one other individual could prepare fossils. So we're going to go first into one part of the building where we used as the makeshift lab. The great part about this is it had some roll-up doors. And so we were able to pull tables outside and do fossil preparation outside, which is also kind of a nice thing to do, except on cold mornings, of course. But we use this space behind me as the primary space for preparation. This room was originally used to house the traveling exhibit storage containers, which many museums required be climate controlled. So the space behind me is a climate controlled room where it has the ability to be controlled. But for our purposes, we don't really need to be climate controlled because we enjoy natural temperatures. So we're now going to head inside. I'm going to flip this around. Oh gosh, where is my flip? There we go. All right. So let's take a walk really quick into the fossil preparation space. So we had 2 tables because there is myself and a young woman by the name of Amanda, and we are the 2 preparators at the museum. We began using the space in March or April, and at that point in time, we had just in October and November of last year, we had worked on a project on the 78 freeway in northern San Diego County, right near Oceanside and Vista. So Caltrans, they were working on a slope that we'd actually in the past had been there before, and it was named Jeff's site. And Jeff was a young man who apparently was playing out by the freeway, which I do not recommend or suggest for anyone. But while he was out there playing, he found some bones, and then the museum was called, and we went out there and we found an early mammal site. So this is about 40 to 42 million years old. And again, this was collected in the 80s, early 90s. And now Caltrans last year was going back to contour the slope yet again. And so they called us and said, hey, would you like another opportunity to come out and salvage material and expand your knowledge on the site? And so Tom Demaray said, yes, of course. In October, November of last year, we were out on the slope of this freeway collecting specimens. So behind me, you see a bunch of specimens laid out on the floor. So this is what I was working on March, April, May, June of this year. These SR78 specimens. And we were again finding early mammals. There were snakes, rhinoceri. What else did we find in there? Oreodont, protoreodont is actually what it is, which is a little llama pig-like animal that lived in San Diego in the past. 40 million years ago, things were really hot back then. So we were this kind of subtropical, tropical environment, not what we know now. Again, Earth was really hot at this point in time. So we had quite a different faunal series than we know now. If you remember the Fossil Mysteries room, the jungle room, that's the period in time where we are with these fossils. That's what represents that period of time.
Perfect.
So yeah, so if you can kind of close your eyes and think back to that room, that's where we are. I was able to bring, we do fossil preparation with pneumatic tools. So it's this compressed air. So we have an air compressor in the next room. And the great thing about the warehouse is when we have fossils, light rail. We have fossils that are too large for the museum. We do the fossil preparation in this space. In the past, that's what we do. We do the preparation here. So we have an air compressor, and we were able to bring the tools down here and again, set up a makeshift lab in this space and able to continue our work for the Paleo Services consulting arm of the museum. One thing that I would just like to kind of show you that I had been working on here that I'm actually going to be bringing into the museum. I'm going to see how this works. Okay, there's a wall, but that's not what I'm currently working on this specimen here, and this is a carnivore jaw. You can see a canine is right here, and then there are 2 premolars, and then there's a molar as we're working our way backwards. So one thing that I'm doing first is I'm trying to cut this so I can make it smaller and more manageable to work with. So, and this is encased in some pretty hard rock. So the challenges with that is when the rock is harder than the bone, there's a potential to damage the bone when you are working on that. So it takes a lot of time, care, and love. But in this site, we're not seeing a lot of carnivores. So that's what makes this specimen very important.
When you say that, Chris, it just reminds me, I'm like, my nerves just kind of shot up, like, oh my goodness, like how, like you're gonna cut things down, and aren't you nervous? And I was gonna say, like, is that something that you go through, like the feelings of I don't want to damage something, or what kind of feelings go through when you're having to slice a rock to get to these fossils?
So it's all about practice and learning curves. So I have there are specimens, these protoreodonts, we call them the sewer rats of the Eocene. So they were everywhere. So you kind of practice on those specimens first, just because again, we have an abundance of them. And so if there's damage to that, then it's the proverbial sacrificial lamb. And that gets you ready to work on these types of sediments. So you kind of gauge and adjust to what to how that works. So I've practiced, and now I'm going to be, now that I've honed my skills on these harder rocks, I know what to do, what not to do. Certain tools create a lot of vibration, and the last thing I want to do is vibrate that bone and potentially shatter it in the matrix. Matrix is just my fancy word for dirt. So nothing, you know, as scientists, we like to use fancy words. Don't let me scare you. If I say something like that, just ask me what I mean. And so again, this is a great place for us to store all the fossils, because as in any collections, you know, at our museum, we are constantly accumulating and receiving new specimens, and we are not necessarily losing specimens. So this accumulation of material, you know, we start increasing in size, and what I like to think about is like adding on new belt loops, so we can kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. So there's always a need for space. Another group of specimens we have here, these on the table, we currently did a salvage at the new San Diego State University Stadium, which is the old Qualcomm Stadium. And so these sediments are 120,000 years to about 80,000 years, which is young. So that's my young fossils. We were finding horse, and we also found so we've been working on a horse skull. We also found a bison skull in there as well. So the bison is at the museum, but all the other fossils are here. So again, we are getting a lot of fossils, and there are only 2 preparators right now because we are not allowed to have volunteers in our museum. So things are moving at a little slower pace, but we are moving forward. So one day soon, we'll be opening up these modern or recent fossils. So that is the climate controlled room. We are now going to move into the larger warehouse space right behind me. Deal with me, I'm going to flip this screen one more time. And we're going to,
and as you're walking, Chris, has this always been the space that the museum has had as a storage for? Wow, look at that, everyone. So you're walking in now and you see this giant space that is full of collections. Has this always been the museum's collection space?
So well, when I was at the museum 16 years ago, I originally came in and it was down in National City. And I would say the space could have been a quarter the size of this. We definitely did not have the luxury of this kind of like, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark last scene where we have this kind of volume. So this is the larger warehouse space. And then at the end of our tour, we're going to kind of go into the back. Where's my finger? We're going to kind of go back here. There's another room that we'll be going into. So this is, I'm going to walk backwards and try not to fall. So what we have in front of us, this is a whole shelving unit of, from my understanding, Galapagos turtle shells. And the story of how our museum acquired these is a good question, but I did mention earlier that, you know, we have things that we don't necessarily need in-house. And because our mission is very regional, Baja California and Southern California, Galapagos turtles don't really fit into that wheelhouse. So we have these turtle shells, which you can see we have multiple of sitting on the shelf. Next to that, we have a humpback whale skull. And the ribs are, here's my finger right here. So here's a humpback whale skull. And this is a modern specimen. And actually this kind of area, I would say back here that we are looking at, I'm gonna kind of like lift the phone up so you guys can see. I would say this is kind of the mammal section or the modern mammal collections. I was not a participant in this, but when a whale washes up, Tom Demeray is very interested in retrieving these. And so it, not only is it very messy, but it smells really bad. So this went from covered in skin and organs and all of the other good stuff to now these bones that are sitting on the shelf. So it takes quite a while for the process for the decomposition to occur, but this is the end result. We have this whale skull, and then there's also a jaw and some vertebrae right over here. I guess I'm going to flip back around. One of my favorite things are is the polar bear and the black bear. Let's see if I can get you guys up there. possibly. So these used to be also in the museum at one point in time. Um, Perhaps earlier this century, there was this kind of very vogue natural history fever that was catching on to everyone in San Diego, where everyone was a naturalist. And we have the exhibit, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Ideas, and that in the library space.
Yeah.
And that is kind of part of this, where just the everyday person would have like kind of natural history um, connection, microscope, or they'd go out and collect, birds or seashells, but everyone kind of had this like little natural history bug in them. And so we have this, okay, let's see if I can get it again, polar bear and black bear, which of course are not regional. Well, the black bear might be, but because of certain rules, I don't think we can have it on display.
Gotcha.
Some of the things you see here are also exhibits. There's a lot of containers, boxes where old exhibits used to live, and now this is kind of the resting place. Sometimes like they're just like oddities, like what this looks like, a painted turtle shell right here. The story behind, and that's kind of the great thing is like I'm sure that there's a backstory behind a lot of these things in here, which I just try to kind of imagine what they could possibly be. Looks like this is a very large mineral that's wrapped up. Here we have some more bones, possibly whale, if that due to size.
Okay.
Um,
So you talked a
I
little
know
bit
that,
about this area kind of being something where the collection has been, comprised of other naturalists over the years, kind of either giving it to the museum or us acquiring it that way. Have you always wanted to be a paleontologist, Chris? Is that something that you were
that
always kind of interested in?
not really. I'm gonna flip this really quick. Uh, so back in school, I was doing a lot of biology and chemistry, and then I took a geology class, and that really kind of opened my eyes to this new path where I was seeing things and learning things that I hadn't learned before, and
Mhm.
being able to look at sedimentary layers and kind of tell a story that really kind of like invigorated me. This enlightenment of being able to look at fossils and geology and kind of create this timeline and story. So
Yeah.
I took the heavy biology chemistry background that I had and I moved it into the geology department, and that kind of turned into
Oh,
paleontology. So it was just kind of taking what I had and working with it into what I wanted to do.
gotcha.
So yeah, geology was amazing. A lot of schools and programs these days don't have a natural history or earth history element to it. So again, these were things that I was just kind of just brand new in knowledge to me, and it was something that I was just kind of eating up. So
Cool.
that's kind of how I became a paleontologist. And my background is actually in micropaleontology. I worked for a paleoclimate scientist back in college, and so we were looking at forams, which are microscopic organisms that float out in the ocean.
Yeah.
And by taking their shells made of calcium carbonate, he was able to determine how warm or cold the Earth was at certain periods of time. So
Wow.
my type of paleontology was very chemistry related. So that's why I kind of fell into that category, kind of like how things just shake out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't necessarily that child that wanted to be a paleontologist, like the quintessential everyone wants to be. I think I wanted to be an astronaut or a fireman or something, not a paleontologist. Yeah,
Both
one
of
of the
those would
other
suit you, though.
one
Both
of
of those
the other
ones.
top 5 professions. Yeah, not paleontology. I was just like dinosaurs, schminosaurs. Who cares? Um, and actually, that's another thing about paleontology is a lot of people, think it's all about dinosaurs. And so there's
Hmm.
definitely lots of different types of paleontology. It's not just the dinos. One of my other favorite parts of the warehouse is what I like to call the stuffed animals. And so they're in bags right now. So this looks like, some sort of like hawk or raptor, if you guys can tell.
Yeah.
Here's some other bird feathers. There was a period where what I like to call the stuffed animal exhibits or the dioramas were really
Mm.
in vogue in museum exhibits. And so I feel that this might have been from that period of our natural history at the museum. Lots of kind of stuffed animals you guys can see in these bags. Oh, there's a little bird skull, and some more just birds and bags, let's say.
Birds and bags.
For those of you that remember, this is vintage SDNHM. There is one of the skulls from the old Dino Cafe. Now it's the Flying Squirrel Cafe, but that used to be hanging up in our space. And again, lots of kind of exhibit storage containers that live here. Whatever this is back here, this is relatively new. This has shown up within the last couple of months, though. I don't know, we share this warehouse with all the other departments. So I don't know if birds and mammals have brought this in, or if this is an entomology thing or herpetology thing, but these cages have recently come in here into this space. One of my other favorite things is this Jade Sculpture that used to be in the museum. Yeah, absolutely stunning. So there's lots of things that are in here that I remember seeing back 16 years ago when I first started. And then we also stored desks and other kind of miscellaneous items that
it's like the storage closet that
yeah, it's a storage
has,
closet, right? So moving around the corner, one other thing that we worked on. Okay, let's drop this and flip the screen. Oh gosh. So we were working on the set.
Oh, Chris, I think you're cut out. All right. I don't know if it's just me, Chris, or. Chris, yeah, I think we lost your audio.
Uh-oh.
Trying to get that. I think you're back on now, but I think you had just cut off prior to that.
Okay. So we're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good now.
I guess I'll just kind of repeat what I just said. In October, November, we were at the 78 freeway salvaging the early mammal that was 40 million years old. Just in in May, June, and July of this year, we were doing a salvage SR11, which is down by the border. So it's an extension of the 905 as you head eastward. There's a planned opening in 2026, a third point of entry, port of entry, at the border. So Caltrans is building the freeway to that new port, and they're calling that SR11. It's approximately 4 miles of freeway, so it's not that long. But while they were doing excavations, one of our paleontologists found some fossils out there. And typically this area is what was called the Otay Formation. It's about 40 million years old. Kind of the similar time as what was happening up in northern San Diego County, this started producing some really strange items that made us scratch our heads. And again, when we're out in the field, there's a lot of preliminary, like, well, what is this? What is this? We're trying to figure it out as it's coming out of the ground. And so what we have determined is it's the Rosarito Beach Formation, which is actually a formation that we see in Mexico, south of the border. And this is the northernmost extension of that formation. So, and from gauging from the animals that we're finding coming out of these sediments, we're thinking this is about 20 million years old, which is fantastic because in the San Diego natural history, we've got this kind of 38 million year area that we know about, and then it kind of moves to about 3 million years. And so that zone in between, that's all kind of not necessarily unknown, but there's deposition and erosion. So there's a lot of erosion occurring, and that those pages in the book are gone. So now someone just like threw in chapter. So we've got this 20 million year old fossil record now. We collected, and I will do a little tour of like how much material we collected, and we're currently working on it right now. But we're finding horse, which is the earlier horses found in San Diego County. So we have a primitive horse, primitive camel, as well as these oreodonts, which would be the latest of the oreodonts, because we had the proto-oreodonts 40 million years ago, and these oreodonts at 20, because we're thinking 20 to 15 million years is this age range. So these are the latest oreodonts in the fossil record right now. So there's some really interesting things due to, I like to call it a crime scene. The breakage of the bones, kind of how things are scattered. We feel that might be den, where carnivore would have brought its prey to eat it. So just again, there's damage to the bones pre-deposition, so it's not a post-depositional thing. And just the way that there are certain morphologies of the bone where muscles attached to, where predators will kind of break that bone. So we're seeing that type of breakage here. So right now the picture is coming into focus. We're still a little blurry, and with ongoing investigation, we'll make this more clear. So at this moment in time, our warehouse, we're storing a lot of these SR 11 fossils. I'm going to kind of give you the little looky-loo. We collected some really large, I don't want to call them really large, but large jackets. And inside these jackets, we feel is part of a carnivore. So, and just kind of remember in the triangle, the pyramid of a predator to prey, when you have a high tier predator, there's usually not too many of them. So let's say there's 1 predator to 10 prey. So the statistical probability of preserving that predator is small. So getting 1 is kind of like our jackpot. So that's what we really want to see. Again, lots of sewer rats. We'll find 100 sewer rats, but what we want to find is that, 1 or 2 of these top tier predators. So this is all material that was collected from the SR11 job site, and it extends all the way to the back here. Also in here are just kind of these larger scaled fossils that we have yet to get our hands on. So eventually, one day we will be working on these really large, I think this is a whale from Orange County, this large one right here, as well as a couple of large scale jackets over here. So this is, that's kind of the paleontology area. I like to pretend this is where the museum keeps all its secrets in boxes. I don't know what's in there, but yeah, there's a bunch of papers. Yeah, we like to keep paper. But I do want to show you kind of the birds and mammal, or the mammal area. Over here, we just have these, mammal skulls. Looks like there's a rhinoceri right here, some sort of deer or antelope. And again, just more large, charismatic megafauna that that we store here off-site. Now, the mammal department does have specimens in the museum, but large scale one, like there's a bison skull down there.
And Chris, one of our members just wanted to, or just asked, can you explain what a jacket is when you were talking about the fossil jackets?
Yeah, so a jacket is when we find a fossil out into the field. What we do is we encase it in a burlap soaked in plaster. So we delineate how big the fossil is. And then what we do is we add toilet paper on top of the fossil to protect it. And then we add another layer of newspaper to kind of add a more protection to it. Because when we open these, we have to saw it open like you would have a cast on your arm. So we don't want to damage the fossil. And then we put plaster soaked burlap, and that kind of creates this shell. So we're able to pluck it out of the ground and bring it back to the museum. So that is a jacket. And then once we finish the preparation of the specimen out of a jacket, we create something called a cradle. And in just a moment, I'm going to take you into the collections room, and I'll show you a cradle.
Thank you so much. And yeah, members, folks, if you have questions like that, please feel free to put them in the question Q&A box, and we will get to them as we're going through this tour. Again, Chris Plouffe is showing us around our collections warehouse. It's been fascinating so far. Chris, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much for this. Again, it's one of the rare opportunities that we get to see inside these warehouses, both for members and sometimes staff as well. I know this is my first time seeing it as well and in depth. So Chris, thank you so much again. And I'll turn it back over to you to explain what we're looking at now.
Okay, so this is a cradle that we would make for the specimen once we've prepared it out. And basically it's just a housing unit to keep it safe and secure from deterioration, from just like sitting on the shelf. So, just like anything in the home, it'll collect dust, and we don't want things to collect dust. The second law of thermodynamics is, things, are more chaotic over time. So we want to make sure that we try to contain that chaos as much as possible. So we'll create these cradles for them that is form fitting to the fossils. What it enables us to do is not only just look at one side of the fossil, and we can flip it over and look at the other side of the fossil. These are relatively large, so I'm not about to try to take off the cap on my own. I know I look very strong, but I'm not going to try to do that. But we built in supports that literally can lift these off the specimen. In front of us, we've got some, this looks like a whale jawbone right here. And then we have 2 whale skulls. And then in the back, there is actually a ground sloth specimen that was found up in northern San Diego County about 120,000 years ago, a project called Robinson Ranch on the El Camino Real. The really interesting thing about this sloth is that it's complete except for the skull. We don't have the head. In paleontology, we either find headless beasts or just the head. And just to kind of remember, our heads are sitting on top of our spinal column, and it's basically tendons and musculature that's holding everything in place. So once we pass away and our body starts to decompose, the head can just roll away. So that's why we see a lot of headless animals or just heads in our fossil collection. Seldom do we find the entire specimen that's complete. So there's a bunch of whale skulls here. And another part of the importance of our collection is from England, we had a young woman come 2 years ago, and she did these 3D scans of all of our whale skulls. And so she created these files for us. We're now able to 3D print these whale skulls that we have in our collection. And we can size that to, you know, half the size, a quarter the size, the 16th of the size. So, you know, our collections aren't just important to us, but also to other researchers. People come in from all over the country to see what we have. Another fun part of this room, and this is climate controlled, so the AC will kick on in here and keep things cool. I would work out in the room over there, and Kessler, who is our collections manager, he was working in here during the shelter-in-place pandemic period. So he was using this as the room to do his curational duties. One of my other favorite things about this room, kind of the specimens we have in here, we'll kind of take a look-see. If you guys, again, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, and we're going back in time, not in time, but we're going back into the museum. Everybody knows the great white shark that's hanging in our atrium, but no one gives enough love to the manatee that's hanging up there. So that big manatee, that is, and I love these so much, and they're heavy, by the way. What I love about these verts are they're heart-shaped.
Oh.
And it's just like the ultimate Valentine's Day, you know, thing. But those manatees, they are the largest known of their kind. And being in the Pacific Northwest, they're kind of like, they were in the coldest waters, because the ones that we think of nowadays are living in Florida, and they're in these kind of warm, temperate, subtropical environments. But this specimen, the one that we have hanging in our museum, was a cooler water specimen. And the cool thing is when I first started working here, we had made a reproduction of these to make that specimen that's hanging in the atrium. One went to China, one went to Japan, I believe, and then we had another one kind of on standby. So we made three different copies of this. So that's one of the cool things that we can do is take these bones and make replicas out of them. So this specimen right here is currently, its copy is hanging in the museum, but these are the actual bones that were copied for that specimen. Yeah, so that's one of my favorites. I love looking up at it and thinking like, because that was one of the things we did. We had to sit there and paint these photocopies bone color. That's another fascinating task. And then right above, this is a whale specimen up here. So we have the complete vertebral column. More jackets with whale bits and pieces live up in here. You guys can see that we do have a lot of whales in San Diego. You know, we're so close to the water that we have a lot of marine fossils. Moving further down,
as you're showing all these specimens, and some of them like they're out of their jackets, and now they're actually specimens that are on site there. There was a question about how do you prevent the dust from accumulating on exposed specimens? Is there like operational things that have to happen, whether you're dusting every now and then, or is there anything that you all take, you know, precaution on?
We do housekeeping on some of the specimens. Now, not all. Some, again, this room should be climate controlled, and we do seal it off, so there shouldn't be too much activity in here. We kind of hope that it's clean-ish,
Yeah.
clean enough. But we do, yeah, we do have to do collections care and going through and dusting kind of these open specimens, because we can't build cradles for all of them. Some of them are actually structurally sound to support their own weight, but some fossils are very fragile. And sadly, they cannot support their own weight. So that's
Hmm.
another reason why we build these cradles. Here are ammonites that, ooh, this is heavy, so I'm not going to try to lift that one up. Oh, this is a smaller one right here. So here are their collection of ammonites. Um, so we have a lot of these, and these came from northern San Diego County as well, up in Carlsbad. A lot of the Cretaceous age sediments are along the coast, so Point Loma, Carlsbad, that kind of like sliver of land along the coast. So we can find these Cretaceous age sediments with these ammonites. And remember, San Diego was underwater at that point, and that's why we have these ammonites. And the ankylosaur slash nodosaur that we have on our collection must have washed out to sea and settled in marine sediments.
Chris, we're
Another
coming
part of
up
this,
to like our very last few minutes now. We have like maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So I
uh-huh.
know it's like a quick, we're like, it's been fascinating, but is there anything in these last 3 minutes that you want to share with the folks listening today?
So I think I was just kind of mentioning, this is a little bit of our overflow area where we kind of keep things that we don't have room for. I don't want to give away any secrets, but hopefully in the near future, we will have a space within the museum where we can showcase a lot of these fossils. We're in kind of the design discussion phase of perhaps turning LB, the basement floor, into the new paleontology kind of lab space, collection space. So that's a very large room, and we'd be able to fit these fossils here and create glass walls where the public can see into our space and see how we work, what we work with. So that's one thing I'd like to mention is, again, like hopefully we'll be bringing some of these specimens back into the museum one day for the public to enjoy.
Cool. Is there any has there been any one? I know you showed us some really great things and things that you love about the collections and certain areas there. Is there a favorite story that you have from working at the museum?
Um, Oh goodness. Anytime we do a salvage where we go out and collect fossils on the
Yeah.
ground, it's a great opportunity for the staff to come together. One of the things is when you're doing field work, we're all kind of in different locations. We're not like a family. So when we
Hmm.
have these salvages, it's a chance for all of us to get together and work together. And then we have kind of this, the ability to work on something as like a family, as a paleontological family. So anytime that we are in the dirt digging together are definitely my favorite times.
Oh gosh, so now I'm just mentally picturing the times of our paleontology department and all of our volunteers coming together and getting their hands dirty, digging up a lot of
Mhm.
fossils and playing, like you said, playing in dirt. Here's hoping for familiar times very soon, Chris. I'm going to bring Emily back in. I know she has a few words to share about what's coming up in the future, other opportunities for member meetups. But any last few words that you want to say with to our members that are listening today, Chris, before Emily shares the closing remarks?
All I can say is, again, thank you for your continuous support for our mission. It's individuals like yourselves that help us do this good work.